Good morning, Sense of Things. This is Jeff and Ron here again, and we are kicking off another week of lots of craziness in the economy, lots of interesting facts. And Ron's going to give us a rundown today on, first off, some 10 of 27. So you're going to have to get the whole list of them. You're going to have to listen to our next episode. But 10 of 27 dated interesting business facts. He's going to give us a rundown on some of the Wall Street price targets that are being updated to you to believe them. And then some other facts here at the end, focusing on just markets in general. So let's on for a second and we'll be right back. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Ron, how are you doing, buddy?
Good morning, Jeff. Doing well. Can't believe it's October, but then I'll say the same thing when we're in January.
Oh, I know. It's just this year has flown by. And for some instances, I'm glad it's gone by fast. But
Well, the funny
yeah,
thing was all the Halloween stuff started coming out at the end of August.
Yeah,
And what's going to happen the day after Halloween?
I don't know.
Christmas season. One of my 'tis the season. Jingle bells, decor, everything's going to start to be in the markets by the very first week in November, like right after Halloween.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's already started. My wife's a big crafter, which we were shopping for fall stuff in like June. And she started doing her Christmas stuff in pretty much like July and August of this year. Our house, first off, she decorated this last weekend and it looks like fall exploded in my house. And pretty much the weekend of Thanksgiving, Christmas will explode in my house at that point. So
I hear you. And the first pre-Black Friday will be the Friday right after Halloween.
Of course.
For sale.
Of course. But then, of course, what is it? Like next week, Amazon's got to do their like weird second Prime Day thing, and then that's kicked off Target doing it and Walmart doing it. So yeah, it's just absolutely insane.
Consume.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. Why don't we kick off? You said you got some fun facts about businesses.
I do. And I got my camera set up a little differently today. So I thought the funniest thing was selfishness. The CEO of Whole Foods reduced his $1 salary to put together this fund of $100,000 relief for employees enduring personal hardships. Not so bad.
Okay. All right.
Hot dog versus hamburger. McDonald's first food was the hot dog, not the hamburger. I did not know that.
I was not aware of that.
Neither was
I. Even watched The Founder, and I don't remember them even talking about
it. Okay, movie, okay, but it was interesting. So what's the catch? You could get free coffee and pastries at a coffee shop in Russia, but you have to pay for your time there.
Okay. Actually,
capitalism to its finest in Russian format.
Yeah, Starbucks should do this for people that sit in the lobby there. Just charge them for
rent by the hour.
Coffee you want, but you're gonna have to pay while you're here.
Yuck! Dasani water doesn't come from spring water; it's just tap water.
Just tap water.
I think I've heard that before, though.
Yeah, actually, there's about 30% of bottled water. Everybody thinks, oh, there's so much better, and it's just tap water.
Vacation to Sweden, anyone? Any Americans who buy a Volvo can get a free holiday to Sweden to test drive their car. All costs, including airfare and shipment of the car, are covered by the Volvo Overseas Delivery Program.
Huh.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that. I have a good friend of mine who used to have a Mercedes, and he actually bought his Mercedes in Europe and then went over to pick it up and drove it on the Autobahn and all that. So it was like his big bucket list thing to be able to drive his car on the Autobahn and then paid a fortune to ship it over to the States.
Now, I know of people that have done that. The problem is 98% or 95 to 98% of the car is the same in Europe as it is in the US, but they have to put on something to the exhaust system for the emission standards in the US that they don't have in Europe.
Yeah. Which is like the greenest place on the planet.
Right.
Yeah, which makes me laugh that we've got more standards and we're less green apparently than they are.
Definitely. So Steve Jobs' secretary told him that he was late for work because that she was late for work because her car wouldn't start. That very afternoon, Jobs came back and threw her a new set of keys to a brand new Jaguar. Here, don't be late anymore. I wish your employer would do this. Now, there's a lot of crazy Steve Jobs stories out
Oh
there.
yeah.
That's don't forget about that. I think it would have been cheaper to just send a limo for her.
Oh no shit. Yeah, I think in the long run, just do an Uber, dude.
That'll just tell
Yeah.
you a little bit about his eccentricities.
Oh, he was a weirdo. No, it was funny because I had the HR person that I worked with at Schwab when I moved to Austin. She actually had worked in the headquarters at Apple for years as a recruiter and HR person. And there was this basically there were days where Steve didn't want to be screwed with, so he could just come into the office. But then there were other days that he wanted to be challenged when he came into the office. He had to show his badge and stuff like that, and you never knew what day it was going to be, and he would get pissed if you didn't do what he wanted, and of course you didn't know at that point. So
unfortunately, a lot of brilliant minds are like that. We got a
oh
lot of
yeah.
them today.
Yep.
All right, next one. Got ice cream? All employees of Ben and Jerry's get to take home 3 free pints of ice cream every single day, probably so they could be the size of Ben and Jerry.
I was gonna say, I mean, Ben and Jerry are not exactly the most slender people that I've ever seen, but yeah, we actually went to the factory when we were in Vermont a few years ago. So it's
So I
intriguing.
heard that the way Crystal has kept you for what, 30 years now at this point, is that she brings you home chubby hubby Ben and Jerry's every night.
There we go. Yep, that's it. That's it. Hey, I was like a slender reed when I met my wife, and not so much anymore.
That's right. We all ascend to the size that we want to be. What can you be?
Yes, there we go.
So benefits from the afterlife. If a Google employee dies, their spouse will receive half their pay for 10 years as well as stock benefits.
Wow.
And any children will receive $1,000 a month until they turn 19.
That's
I did
actually
not
very
know that.
impressive. I was not aware of that at all.
Yeah.
Pretty slick.
Take that mask off. In response to China's air pollution, a Chinese millionaire started selling cans of fresh air for 80 cents and made over 6 million in 10 months.
Let me guess. The company is called Perrier, right? Spaceballs.
Listen, and I think that person might have been a descendant of the one that sold the pet rock in the 70s.
I think so, because he was Chinese as well. But yeah, it's Spaceballs all over again. Perrier.
All right, and the last one for this round, Google's environmental solutions. Rather than using mechanical mowers, Google employs 200 goats to naturally mow and fertilize the
I'm all
campus
over
lawns.
this.
I wouldn't want to be downwind of that lawn.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you don't want to be downwind of Google headquarters no matter what, but wow. Yeah, hey, whatever. It's much easier. They don't complain. You feed them and they just keep doing their jobs. Who knows?
All right. So getting into a little bit of economics. So for the last year and a half, we were talking about the 210 inversion when the 2-year treasury is above the 10-year treasury. Typically, there's a recession within 16 to 22 months. We didn't get one because it first inverted or last inverted in March of 2022. And this has been the longest period of the inversion. In the last couple of weeks in September 2024, the 10 finally went above the 2-year, meaning it reinverted. And typically they look at recessions happening within 3 to 6 months of that period of time. So meaning when it initially inverts, it's within 16 to 22 months, because during that period of time, typically it reinverts. It reinverted after that period of time. So this should be interesting that we see this over here now, that this is when it reinverts, and you can see every other time when it has reinverted what has happened. So we'll have to see. I don't know if it's different this time or not, but I thought this was interesting to point out, so we could keep an eye on this. And obviously the SOM rule, I know in the next podcast you're going to talk about jobs, because we get a new job report tomorrow for September, and that should increase a little bit more with the SOM rule and possibly affect the re-inversion. I don't know if you had paid attention to that.
I hadn't thought about that, but we'll go with it.
All right. So this was interesting. I know we showed this twice before, once in January, and this was you and I with our price targets for the end of the year. We came up with our bullish case, our base case, and our bear case. And oh boy,
I don't even know where we're at today.
Whatever dart we were throwing at a dartboard, we missed the dartboard.
Yeah.
But I thought what was interesting is, I believe it was about 3-4 months ago, May, June timeframe, that a lot of Wall Street people raised their forecast then. They raised it again. So we're basically around the 5,700 level of the S&P 500 index. But I thought what was interesting was the one on the bottom, JP Morgan. Now, JP Morgan, Marko Kolanovic, who, if you've ever listened to him, he's like the Fed whisperer. That's what they call him. He's very articulate, very well thought out in his market analysis. And he had 4,200 on there. And because the market was just flying the first 6 to 7 months of this year, he took, quote unquote, a leave of absence from JP Morgan. JP Morgan just raised the price target 2-3 weeks ago, sometime in September, to 4,700. And I thought that was interesting because that's 1,000 points less than where we are right now.
Yeah.
So unless we get a collapse, for lack of a better way of saying it,
massive
that would be
collapse.
about a 17-18% yank back in the market to get to 4,700. That's unbelievable.
I just like the way Homeboy decided to take a leave of absence so he didn't look like a complete idiot by the end of the year.
He might have been nudged out for a little bit too.
That's true. Dude, we've been way too conservative all year. I was listening to Charles Payne the other day, and he was saying this is the greatest start to a first 3 quarters of a year on the S&P ever in history at this point, which makes me worry because it could be running well beyond. I sit there and I benchmark against the S&P 500 and I look at our performance is lagging, but I'm like, you know what? I just can't go all in at this point. And this thing can reverse extremely fast over a couple days at this point and get into a correction. And I do not want to be left holding the bag when it comes to that.
And for the most part, the top 10 stocks peaked in July.
Yeah.
They haven't. It's been the other 490 that has brought it up, broad base. But the interesting thing is, and I just wrote about this in my newsletter this week going out to clients, that I had 2 clients 3 days apart. I think I mentioned this in a prior podcast. All said to me, Ron, if all the economic data has been trending down the last 18 months, why is the market going up? It's a good question.
It is.
And you got to chuckle because the answer is, I don't know. And I'd say the main reason, and this is what I wrote about, is employment. Even though employment is ticking up, unemployment is ticking up, it's still at what they quote unquote call full employment levels over the last 100 years. So as long as people still have jobs, as long as they're spending, and maybe they're spending money that they don't have in credit cards and whatever, the market's going to keep getting propped up.
Yeah, I would say that. And I would say the other part is there's been a massive shift in 401ks. And you and I have been in the 401k business a long time, a massive shift away from managed mutual funds because of the cost, which is negligible, to index funds. On the top 3 index funds in the country, S&P 500 funds, represent almost 35 to 40% of the market. And those are buy and hold investors. So that's every single week. People's paychecks are going in. They're going into those S&P 500 funds, and they just continue to buy more.
And think about how many funds
happens in the short run.
Yeah, and think about how many funds those top 10 stocks are in.
Yeah. That's the thing. And the reality of it is it's going to continue to be buoyed up until it isn't. And I think it will be the employment situation if we start to see unemployment really get out of hand, which isn't necessarily just because of the economy. It can be the port strike. It can be, it's funny. I haven't heard mention of the Boeing machinist strike, which has basically shut Boeing down and at least 45 other countries.
Is that still going on?
It is. I hadn't heard of it. I was like, you know what? Let me just look it up, and it'll be in this next thing that we go through on my
Oh,
piece of it, because I was like, I don't even know what's going on. And that thing's been going since August, and it's
couple months,
affected
yeah.
everybody down the chain. All these companies are like laying off and furloughing employees because Boeing's basically not working right now.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
So
until next podcast, that I'll do the other 17. There's some
perfect.
gems in there too. But I know in our next podcast, if people stay tuned, that was a nice tease by Jeff. We're going to go through the unemployment number and definitely talk about some of the strikes going on with the unions.
Absolutely. Folks, thank you for joining us. We've been trying to keep these a little shorter just so that you can consume the information quickly and move on. Make sure that you are subscribing to the channel. Make sure that you give us a thumbs up when you can. Give us a comment if you can. And we will see you guys back here the next time.